Welcome back to Let's Play Higurashi Himatsubushi. And for the third time in a row, I'm sat up on my bed instead of just moving the fan off my desk. I am just too lazy. It is 10 in the morning on the day that I'll be uploading this probably. Well, probably not. Because I'll probably end up I don't know how I'll upload this one. Maybe I'll upload it earlier than usual. Simply because I just know by the freaking time it gets around to my usual schedule, if I'm still up by that point, I'd be completely knackered. I woke up around about midnight, and I've been up since. And it took me 2 freaking hours to upload on my main channel, because, Windows Update took 2 bloody hours. It was ridiculous. They also screwed up the audio as well, so I had to change the settings once again. Doesn't make much of a difference here, though, it seems. Who's speaking? Well then, shall we hurry up and get going? If the enemy knew that the police had obtained the wallet, then they would probably have moved the hostage to a different place. There wasn't a moment to lose, but Ooishi, without regard to the fact that we were about to head out, began to remove his jacket. What are you doing? Well, just a precaution. If you want to poke the beehive to get your honey, I have to be rather well prepared, you see. You want to put one on too? What Ooishi pulled from the drawer below the desk was a stab-proof vest. Shit's getting serious. His name was Toshiki Inagai, the grandson of the Minister of Construction Inagai. There was only one reason for him being here. If he didn't include gym or art class, his grades were above average. That was the result of having private tutoring sessions twice a week. If you omitted the fact that he still couldn't do pull-ups, there wasn't much else that would make him hate school. Of course, he understood full well that his grandfather was a cabinet minister. But he also knew that not too many people were that interested in their relationship. He didn't like to go out of his way to bring up his grandfather or to call him the Minister of Construction. And finally, he at least tried to know a little more about what kind of work the Minister of Construction did than your average Joe. What that entailed was that when you tried your best to make life better for the masses, sometimes you made a few enemies. He knew that all too well from the time he'd spent as class representative. His grandfather had many enemies. He knew that he might personally catch some of that fallout, so he had to be twice as cautious. He was taught that by his parents. That's why, the moment he was kidnapped, he instantly knew that this was one of those occasions. He understood that he wasn't being treated as Toshiki Inagai, the person, but rather as Toshiki Inagai, the grandson of the Minister of Construction. That he wasn't personally at fault, but that this was the result of some unavoidable trouble with his grandfather's work. It made little difference, but when he realized it wasn't because of anything he did, he was able to relax, if only a little. Of course, at first he was struck with a terror befitting his age, wondering what was going to happen to him. But after a while of being tied up and only able to stay lying down, he began to ponder a great many things. First, he thought about the reason he was being abducted like this. He understood the answer to that easily. He was taken hostage because his grandfather, the minister. There was no doubt about that. He didn't know exactly what the Minister of Construction did, but it was easy to imagine that there was much to be gained from threatening him. He respected his grandfather more than most. He earnestly believed that his own grandfather was within the top 20 of the most important people in Japan. That was exactly why he wouldn't forgive anybody who tried to threaten his beloved grandfather. More importantly, he wouldn't forgive anybody who would use him as a tool to threaten his grandfather. His grandfather was really busy, and rarely had time to meet with relatives. That's why, with what little time he did manage to scrape together, he just dropped by unannounced. And as an apology for not being able to meet during New Year's or summer vacation, he doted on his grandson very, very much. The number of times that Toshiki was looked upon with disregard just because his grandfather was a politician and a minister certainly went few. But he never thought even once that he wanted his grandfather to quit being a politician. Because it was his beloved grandfather, he wanted him to continue his career as long as possible from the bottom of his heart. However, Toshiki was now being held hostage and his grandfather was being threatened. His grandfather, who called him the apple of his eye, was surely suffering. He might do anything to save his grandson, maybe even putting aside his ideology if it was required to save his grandson. He might give in to the culprit's demands if it meant saving his grandson. When Toshiki thought about that, an inexplicable anger welled up within him. In his current situation, he was unable to forgive the cowards who would make his beloved grandfather suffer by using such dastardly means. That feeling welled up inside of him, displacing the fear. When he thought of that, was something any boy would imagine. Get out of these ones, beat up the bad guys, then hand them over to the police. Yeah, sure, you can handle that, kid. And I just, realizing we haven't gone over the word of the day. But yeah, sure, kid, sure. That would work out real well for you, that would. Let's see, word of the day. How about... See, how about... Just put the microphone down, seriously, when I'm freaking going through these pages. How about Kabe? Is that Kabe? Kabe? Let me just double check. That is the character for bear, right? Kabe. God damn, it takes forever to find this page. Where is it? Yeah. Kabe. I've already freaking forgot what it was, actually. I was so busy trying to figure out, if I was saying it right or not, I completely overlooked what the word actually meant. I think it meant wall, which is a random word for the day, but yeah, it's a wall. Anyways. Images of all the brave heroes from all the manga he had read passed through the back of his mind. In his imaginary scenario, he flipped his bones easily, floating like a butterfly to evade his captors and stinging like a bee to bring them all down. In the end, it was nothing more than a silly little fantasy, but with his vision obstructed and unable to see anything, it was something that he could get into more than any anime at the moment. You know, this is like late 70s takes place in... I mean, I know manga and anime been around many years, but still. What manga and anime would have been around in 1978? In actuality, he was enjoying these little scenarios in his head for a long period of time. He was tied up. His captors hadn't really done anything to him that they would feel sorry for. The ref eventually began to grow tired of his fantasies, and more realistic scenarios began to run through his head. It was then he realized that none of them were a solution. Yes, he wanted to do something for his grandfather, who was being threatened. That he was being held there to inflict pain on his grandfather was the thing that he could least forgive, and also the most vexing. And then he noticed the screen is blank this whole bloody time! God! Maybe it's because I'm just tired, because I've been up since midnight. But I'm just like reading through all this and just like, he's just dragging on. This is like when I ramble, man, essentially. It just goes on and on. Get to the point, kids! There was a much simpler way he could save his grandfather without having to beat up his despicable captors. That was to remove himself as a hostage from the hands of these villains. If he was to disappear from here, his captors would have nothing to threaten his grandfather with. The captors restrained him, but they didn't treat him roughly, and they made sure he was spared well enough. Meaning, at most, he was nothing more than the means for their threat. They weren't looking to bully or kill him out of spite. If he behaved, no ill would befall him. Realizing that gave him a strong sense of courage. And carrying his train of thought this far, he let it run its course to its natural conclusion. Right now, at this moment, Toshiki Nagai had decided to escape. His ears had been stuffed with a sponge-like material, acting as makeshift earplugs. However, they didn't actually do much to block out any sound, and he could overhear everything his captors were saying. Realizing that this was to his advantage, even when his captors spoke to him, he acted like he couldn't hear them due to the earplugs. His captors, thinking that he couldn't hear their conversation, talked about all sorts of things without any reservations. Thanks to that, he was able to obtain various pieces of information, such as when they talked about him potentially shitting himself. First off, this was in Tokyo. It seemed that this was quite a distance away, and on top of that, in the countryside, nestled deep in the mountains. It also seemed that his captors were inconvenienced living out here, so he could deduce that this place was far removed from any sort of town. Finally, whenever they went out to buy food or other supplies, they would always take a car. That fact caused him some dismay, because he knew that the method he learned at school of running around blindly while shouting for help wouldn't work here. He paused his little mental escape scenario here. There. His ultimate goal was to find somebody who would help him. If somebody who fit that description wasn't close by, his chance of escape successfully grew slim. A desolate far-off land deep in the mountains. A place where you couldn't even go shopping without using the car. In this situation, escaping would be very difficult. He grew depressed, and after a little while, he returned to his original scenario. Imagine him becoming a hero like in the manga he read, and beating down his captors became his respect. However, as he played those delusions out in his head, his heart, hating to surrender, continued to search for a way to escape. And then he thought of a way. If the goal was far away, then all he had to do was get closer. His goal, in a nutshell, was to find somebody who would help him. Well, duh! But how is he gonna frickin' do that? In other words, somebody other than his captors. If he faked being sick, then his captors would have to take him to the hospital or bring a doctor to him. Well, I suppose, but I think they'd probably wait it out. They would probably be reluctant to do that, but he already knew that the hostage was more important than anything. If in the off chance that something happened, like him dying, occurred, he wouldn't be able to threaten anybody anymore. Luckily, he had an experience that would help him fake a serious illness. At the end of last year, he was inadvertently involved in a car accident and had to undergo surgery. The scar from that surgery was still clearly visible on his lower torso. He recalled the pain and suffering from that time. The existence of that experience would make a huge impact on the realism of his performance. He was quite confident in his ability to fake an illness. He had skipped out on many school days. Well, he sounds like he's actually more of a diligent kind of kid, so never mind. His captors at first took that as a sign he needed to use the washroom. Well, that does sound like... No, that doesn't sound like the sound someone would make when they need to take a shit. Untying only his arms, they tried to bring him there while he was still blindfolded, but he didn't try to get up. His hands now free only clutched at his abdomen as he writhed in agony. Hey, what's wrong? Does your stomach hurt? He still had his earplugs in, so he had to pretend he didn't hear his captors asking the question. He was about to nod, so he hurriedly had to stop himself. What's the matter? Yeah, the kid's clutching at his stomach. Must be a stomachache or something. His captors looked down on his suffering form for a bit. One of them proposed a course of action while another laid his doubts that Toshiki might be faking it. What's wrong, boy? Yeah, tummy hurts. His ears are plugged so he can't hear you. Well, that's a problem. Do we got any medicine that works on stomach pain? Might want to go to the pharmacy and buy some. When it comes to stomach pain, there's a bunch of different meds, isn't there? As long as we don't know the cause, we shouldn't just buy him any old medicine. His old his stomach, but maybe it's just constipating. If you buy him some medicine for that, well, maybe that'll calm him down. It won't kill him if we're wrong, neither. Don't decide something like that on your own. It might be appendicitis or something. My uncle suddenly got it a while ago. That was pretty scary. Well, the captors leaned beside the boy who was bent over in agony. I feel sorry for the kid. Whoa, his whole body's covered in sweat. Is it your stomach? Does it hurt? Hey, if it hurts, you shouldn't clutch at it so tightly. It'll only make it worse. Remember when this was the guy that seemed like the less caring one? That was kind of role reversed a bit between the two. Realizing that his captors were concerned about his stomach, he inadvertently let his shirt right up, letting the scar from his surgery come into plain view. His vision was still obscured with packing tape, so he couldn't see their reaction to his scar. But his captors were taken aback, and judging from their momentary silence, he had obtained the reaction he was looking for.
Hey, this is bad. The scar, it's not that old. Does the boy have a theater? There's a thermometer around. No way we have one. Well, that's a lot of sweat. Yeah, his forehead feels pretty hot, I think. I've heard that under prolonged stress, all wounds can be aggravated. And what do we do? I hear saying our medicine won't work. We don't know what surgery the scar was from, but in any case, this is bad. In the worst case, it could be fatal. This is bad, real bad. Maybe we should have a doctor take a look at it. At this rate, there's a chance that he might suddenly die on us.
Toshiki and the guy with those few words knew that the situation was progressing exactly as he had envisioned it, and snickering to himself on the inside, pressed his acting further. He didn't even need to see to know that his captors were panicked and were running around like chickens with their heads cut off at this troublesome turn of events.
Should we take him to the clinic? Oh, that's no good. Probably better if the doctor come here. Dr. Irie, you mean? Is that okay? Will that be alright? Be worse if anything happens to the hostage. Nothing we can do. It's an emergency.
When the captors hurriedly left in the car, another of the men, completely shaken up at this point, wiped the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Looked like they were bringing a doctor. As long as the doctor wasn't an accomplice, that doctor was his goal. He was someone he should seek help from. The captors were probably wary of that happening. They would be prepared for it. This would all come back to luck. Down, I mean. Some of the sweat emerging from his brow was from that nervousness. At that moment, the packing tape that was covering his eyes and ears were torn off. The burning light that he was seeing for the first time in several days hurt his eyes. After that, the gag that made it hard for him to breathe was also removed.
Are you alright, kid? We're bringing a doctor to you right now. Just hold on for a bit.
The doctor was coming. Now, how was he going to ask for help, and how was he going to get away from his captors? Thoughts began swirling around his mind.
I think you know this already, but don't say anything unnecessary to the doctor. We don't want to hurt you or anything. You understand that, right?
Toshiki and the guy nodded while feigning pain and obedience. His expectations and the enemy's expectations. Well, they doubted he was faking his illness or not. They knew what his goal was and would try to stop it. His stomach ache contracted from the stress of this gambit to making it seem like his stomach really was starting to hurt. No, it really was. So there was no reason to panic. If he failed with his approach to the doctor, there was nothing to lose. If there was something to lose, it was this method of faking illness to get in touch with the doctor. If he could think of other methods from here on out, it wasn't much. But at the present, this was the easiest and most dramatic way he could think of. The more he thought about it, the more it looked like this was his first and last gambit. Eventually, he heard the sound of a car approaching once again. The sound of the car doors being hurriedly opened and shut. The sounds of several footsteps approaching. A young man in a white medical coat. As he acknowledged the boy, a suspicious look showed itself on his face.
Who's he? He's not one of the kids from the village, is he?
The captors didn't respond. From the looks of it, the young doctor had realized that this was an abnormal situation. When the captors talked threateningly,
"That's got nothing to do with you, Doc."
For a while, the doctor and the captors silently glared at one another. However, unable to stand aside the boy continuing to suffer, the doctor, as the captors had hoped, didn't press any further.
"I'm concerned about this old surgical scar. What kind of operation was it?" "We don't know." I should really bring him back to the clinic. Doc, we really can't do that.
The The doctor said he wanted to bring the boy back to the clinic, but the captors simply silently shook their heads at the notion. It was a fleeting hope, but it was only natural that the captors would refuse. At that moment, his eyes met with the doctor's. Seeing that the boy's painful state was abnormal, the doctor suspected it was a serious illness.
Are you all right? I'm a doctor. When was this surgical scar? When was this surgical scar from?
Last year, during the winter, from an accident.
Yeah, an accident. I see. This is a problem.
He couldn't let the doctor figure out that he was faking it here. He had to somehow figure out some way to keep this going and tell the doctor that he was being confined and needed help.
I'm gonna touch the affected area, okay? If it hurts, tell me where.
Ah! Seeing that it was extremely painful, the doctor crossed his arms and began to ponder. He had to somehow get himself to a hospital. The Toshiki and a guy faking his illness was the performance of a lifetime.
Higurashi when they cry. I've got a headache. When have I not got a headache, really? I always bloody have a headache. Good work, everyone in our town, please do your best. If you catch anybody lately, please contact somebody immediately. Get quickly. Thank you for your cooperation to each side, please.
No. A gap wide enough for a single car was opened up in the barricade. Ooishi showed his gratitude, or perhaps a threatening attitude, with a short beep on the horn, rolled the car forward for the checkpoint. This time my appearance was the very embodiment of the word suspicious. Baseball cap, mask, and sunglasses. On top of that, even though it was sweltering, I was wearing a hoodie. Any respectable police officer would be loath to not stop me for questioning. I'd meant to be overcautious, knowing full well that my face was known, but it might have already been too late for that to have any use. Using as an excuse, I doffed the unbearably hot hoodie and ripped off the mask and hat and threw them in the seat behind me.
Oh my, is that okay? With a cheap little disguise like this, they probably figured it out anyways. That just might be the case.
I should probably thinking that my unexpected behavior was funny and continued to laugh. The beautiful and pristine scenery of Hinamizawa spread out before me. The village itself would have been quite beautiful if it weren't for the complicated circumstances surrounding it at the moment. I would absolutely love to take Yuki here for a drive one day. Come to think of it, I didn't get a chance to call her last night. I played around with the idea in my head, but in reality this village wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. I'd heard everything at the prefectural headquarters. At the heart of this village, the intelligence network that the three families wielded was, due to blood ties and regional relationships, unbelievably well organized. Their net spread not just around Hinamizawa itself, but encapsulated the entirety of the city of Shishibane as well. When I first heard that, somewhere in the recesses of my mind, I didn't take it completely seriously. How could a local organization out in the boonies here have something so grandiose? I couldn't deny that somewhere in the back of my mind I had ridiculed the thought. But not only were they really threatening the minister, but they had demonstrated they had a complete grasp on our movements, which were supposed to be top secret. They were almost like the secret police that controlled a small Eastern European country, like in some spy novel. The villagers here wouldn't bat an eye at getting their hands dirty if it meant fighting the dam project. I also heard something like that at the prefectural headquarters. And now that you mention it, when I first arrived here, Ooishi also said that this place was a war zone, didn't he? What? That gives an indication that it's conversation not fought, because like, what kind of freaking, just like, now that you mention it, Are you breaking the fourth wall? What are you doing? I don't know what the hell is up with that. The residents of this village were at the same time freedom fighters. Although by definition they were no different than guerrillas or a militia. Or they weren't protected by the Geneva Convention, but they also didn't have to adhere to those rules either. This place was more of a quagmire than any legitimate battlefield. A secret war was unfolding. I could drive along because Ooishi was with me. But if I was to leave this car for even something as trivial as looking for a vending machine, there was a chance I wouldn't return. Even though a single shot hadn't been fired, this was a battlefield. No, the reason why bullets weren't firing was simply because it was hard for a civilian to obtain a gun in Japan. So they were probably just equipped with weapons other than guns that were easier to obtain. That was why Ooishi was wearing that stab-proof vest, wasn't it?
Akasaka-san, are you nervous?
He's nervous because there's no music! The fact that I was apprehensive was, of course, picked up on by Ooishi. If he already figured it out, there was no point in trying to deny or hide it.
Of course I am. We're heading into the heart of enemy territory alone, aren't we? I'm worried about if something unlikely happens with just the two of us. Something unlikely? It'll be alright. Isn't everybody in this village our enemy? If everybody gets their story straight, they could murder someone in broad daylight and there wouldn't be a shred of evidence. I'm asking about something like that. This was the ironclad rule of not barging into a youngster's office alone was about. If there wasn't a neutral party involved, that area wasn't bound by the laws of common sense. If something happened, you wouldn't be able to prove it, and there wasn't anybody who would take your side. It was pretty much the definition of poking the bear. I've left word that we're headed towards the Hinamizawa area, and in the worst case, we're also got a radio. I know you're scared, Akasaka-san, but it's not that easy to pull off the perfect crime. Well, of course, that doesn't mean we can let our guard down either. Akasaka-san, you're too worked up over this. You were more relaxed the last time we came up here together, weren't you?
Laughing it off, Ooishi filmed his chest and grinned as if to say I could depend on him.
Well, if it gets really iffy, this comes with having the badge.
Ooishi made a motion by sticking out his index finger. It was undoubtedly the image of a gun.
Will it be any use? You're not afraid of dealing with the aftermath after you shoot it. It's actually very reassuring.
An officer's gun was only for show. If you really wanted to fire it, there were quite a number of stipulations, and you had to be prepared for the long period afterwards. That definitely wasn't worth it, so even if an officer did unholster his gun, there wasn't one who actually wanted to pull the trigger. Then you look on the other side of the world, in the US, when it comes to police using guns. No hesitance there. Like that whole thing, just like, shoot first, ask questions later. I mean, imagine it isn't always the case, but it does come up a lot in that. Complete opposites.
Akasaka-san, are you carrying one? A piece? Well, yeah. You ever find it?
I have. For training, though.
Well, I guess that'd be true.
Well then, have you, Ooishi-san? And where's the music, for crying out loud?
Me? There's no way.
What was this? I thought he was laughing at me because he had experience. The two of us laughed together. Okay, maybe that's Ooishi then.
You also never pointed the barrel at anybody. I've looked down the barrel of a gun a few times, so just being made to look down the barrel like that is enough to shorten your lifespan by about 3 years.
Even if he had never fired a gun before, you couldn't even begin to compare the amount of experience Ooishi had over me. At a time like this, I could only marvel again at how reliable Ooishi seemed.
Come to think of it, I didn't want to come this way in the middle of the day, but there's no way for a car to get through other than here. Akasaka-san, just in case, put on the mask again to hide your face, please. What's the matter? Can you not hear it because the air conditioner is too loud? I'll turn it off. Try opening the window. When I opened the window, a blast of hot air blew inside, and then I could hear angry yelling coming from far away. Finally, the soundtrack! At that moment, the forest gave way on either side of us, and our view expanded suddenly. And there could be seen the Hinamizawa Dam construction grounds, the very front line for Hinamizawa Village. We're absolutely opposed to the construction of the Hinamizawa Dam! The crackling blare of someone's voice sounded over an enormous loudspeaker. The roar of angry voices continued to rumble. The incredible volume had become a veritable sound cannon spewing out its ammunition. The brigade site office was surrounded by 2 sets of high fences laced with barbed wire. Lined up in front of those fences were riot police and their vehicles, and surrounding it all were the villagers. They howled at their protests against the dam as a single entity. Oh, there's not too many of them today. We're in luck. That's not too many. Yeah, when there's a lot of them, the crowd reaches as far as the road. You wouldn't even be able to inch forward in a car. At first, due to their overwhelming intensity, it looked to me like there were more people than there actually was. But upon closer inspection, there were at most 50 to 70 of them. But that's still quite a lot, isn't it? But the 6 or 7 propaganda trucks lined up that looked like they belonged to a band of thugs were a strange enough sight. Villagers were also wearing helmets and bandanas, as well as covering their faces with masks, adding to the oddity of it all. The propaganda trucks, after braying their chorus, had their volume turned up even higher and began to flood the area with sutras. To say that the noise was downright violent wouldn't be an understatement. From this distance, it was still this loud. The glass in the office was probably rattling from the noise. I can't do anything there but take it. Those riot squad guys, every one of them is wearing earplugs, but they're still having their hearing damaged. Poor souls. Can't you do something about it with noise audience laws? My prefecture doesn't have any laws regarding noise audience. Also, there are soldiers, right? We can't regulate religious activities. Those guys are pretty smart. Is what I think Ooishi said. Actually, no matter how tightly the window was shut, the booming sound of the sutras... Zao's pronounced? Probably not. Still filled the car. Sutra is probably Zao's pronounced, isn't it? Maybe. I couldn't even hear what Ooishi, who was sitting right next to me, was saying. As the car approached the line of propaganda trucks, the blare became difficult to bear. So is it like the equivalent of a ridiculously loud concert? Because, man, that would be hell on your ears, that would. It wasn't enough to just pluck my ears with my fingers that to hold my head to stop my skull from splitting apart. If I had seen this terrifying energy sooner, I would have probably understood what Hinamizawa Village was much quicker. Now I knew they wouldn't blink an eye at sacrificing themselves in order to protect their hometown. Ah, so goddamn noisy. Shut up, shut up, shut up! My head throbbed and felt like it was going to split apart. My eardrums cracked, and on top of it all, I felt like I was going to throw up. With the road crowded with a throng of squatters, the propaganda trucks, and the riot police's vehicles, it was in no way easy to get by. Even if you tried to shoo the squatters with a car horn. They were also wearing earplugs, oblivious to the noise from the outside world, and wouldn't easily move. The car could only inch forward at a snail's pace. Even then, the car eventually got through, starting to leave the tumultuous noise behind. Hey, the bald guy that was playing mahjong with us last night. Wait. No, this is probably Ooishi. Hey, the bald guy that was playing mahjong with us last night. Remember him? I remembered that there was an older person who didn't exactly mince words. That guy that Ooishi called Old Man. There was someone like that. You see, he's the foreman of the main construction site. He's probably holed up in that He found building trying to work while irritated out of his mind. Poor fella.
You wouldn't be able to stand it if it's like that every day.
Yeah. There's no end to the number of people who can and handle it and quit. Every time that happens, their wages go up, so I won't say it's in vain.
Even having to deal with all that noise and hostility, they still made a wage that Ooishi found enviable. Well, they'd have to pay them a ridiculous amount to deal with that shit on a daily basis.
Damn it, these guys, they hear or can't they?
A group of squatters were in the way of the car. Ooishi, sufficiently annoyed, laid into the horn, but there was no indication that they were moving anytime soon. In this din, could they not even hear a car horn? Or did they hear it and were being malicious? If there were any riot police nearby, they would have made people move, but it just so happened there weren't any around here.
Ah, jeez, wait just a minute.
Ooishi opened up the door. The hot air and even more heated roar of the crowd spilled into the car. That's the sound they hear. No. Ooishi said something as he grinned widely, but I couldn't hear what it was. He was getting them to move. Something like that. Ooishi stepped out of the car and closed the door. The din faded slightly. I stared blankly as Ooishi headed towards the group and started some sort of conversation. How the hell would they be able to have a conversation in that environment? Maybe we'd find the minister's grandson at Toshiki. At the very least, I wanted to find him there. Find him and slip the cursed bonds of this incomprehensible village. I could only pray. When suddenly, at that moment, a shadow was suddenly cast over me. Somebody was standing right outside the passenger side window, blocking the sunlight. I spun around, looked up, and realized who the backlit figure was. It's the ultimate Cliffhanger! I don't even know who it's gonna be. It'll probably be something anticlimactic. But could it be something more interesting than that? I don't know, I can't remember. But nonetheless, I wouldn't be able to freaking record. Well, actually, how's the charge looking? 42%. It would pretty much go down pretty quickly in that time. So, yeah, I'm gonna call it a recording now. So we'll find out who that figure is in the next part. We'll see you next time, viewers. See you next time.